Hello, everybody out there in podcast land, and thank you for joining me, Ben Calder, again for another Integral Health podcast. I'm really excited today in that I'm lucky enough to have with me Kris Davies, who is an incredible woman. Not only is she a face yoga teacher and trainer, and the brains and the beauty behind Savvy Health and Body, which are a skin care range. She's also a beauty guru, trainer, best-selling author, and holistic aesthetician, if I manage to get my lips around that okay. So, Kris, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you. Yeah, it's a bit of a mouthful, that aesthetician. So
Yes.
yeah. Thank you very much for asking me to be on your podcast. That
No, really.
I'm very grateful for that. And esthetician is a funny word. People over the years have asked me, do I actually put people to sleep in operations? I said, no, that's an anaesthetician. Now I'm an esthetician. So yeah, sometimes it's easier to avoid that word. But yes.
And for anybody that's not sure, of course, that's just referring, it comes from the root word aesthetics, doesn't it? It's for something to look good. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. There's a bit more on qualifications, if you like, in the beauty industry with that. But yeah, that's basically what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. And I also want to congratulate you because I think that out of a lot of people that I've worked with over the years and a lot of people that I've had conversations with, I think that at the moment you pretty much draw the winning prize for having been practicing what you're doing for the longest. Because you originally qualified in 1983, is that right?
I think that's what it was, wasn't it? Yes, I try not to add it up these days. Yes, 83, 84. Yes, I was fortunate enough to go to Champneys in Hertfordshire after being turned down in local colleges. Actually told I'd never make a beauty therapist because I didn't have enough confidence. So yeah, I went back to school and decided again that wasn't for me. And I went to Champneys, and that was, to be fair, it was hard work. It was a condensed course, but it was brilliant. And that level of training has always stayed with me.
Brilliant. And, I think personally it's great to have such a strong beginning within training to give us good frameworks. I think is the best foundation for expanding. And I know those of you who are listening can't see what I'm seeing at the moment. I have Kris on my screen in front of me as we're recording, and there's no way she looks like she qualified in 1983. So, whatever it is, we'll talk a little bit about the savvy skin products a little bit later on, but whatever it is, you need to check in on what Kris is doing because it's working for her. So hopefully it'll be a value for everybody else. But let's take a little bit of a trip back because I know you and I both have in common as a colleague Elaine Godley, and I know in 2019 when she did her book on True Life Stories, Perfect Health, that she co-authored with Jess Prime, that you had a section in that talking about your kind of historical aspect of fibromyalgia and how that began with you. So maybe if we go back a little bit and just talk a little bit about your work history and how you were before the fibromyalgia, what happened, and then where it led you on to, if that's okay.
Okay, so prior to diagnosis with fibromyalgia, then it was the period of basically what's going on. But prior to fibromyalgia, I'd also been diagnosed with psoriatic arthritis. And that was way before. I can't even remember when that was. But it was an exceptionally stressful time for me. Different family things going on, and losing my salon business. And it obviously accumulated and it came out in that way with me. So bit by bit, things was an extremely stressful time. And I then went to, I had an operation on my stomach I had to have surgery on my stomach for a hernia, inguinal hernia, which was exceptionally large. Due to apparently when I was younger and had a salon, I was absolute fitness freak, and I did bodybuilding and I did and I basically overdid it. And then having 3 children, my stomach went a little bit, let's say it just wouldn't go back then.
Sure.
But it was causing me a lot of problems. It was causing me a lot of pain, a lot of problems. Anyway, I ended up going to and having this operation, and it was far worse than they anticipated. So it was an exceptionally long operation. But after that, I then discovered I had slipped discs as well.
Wow, okay.
But going into that operation and a few weeks before, I kept having dreams that I wasn't going to survive the operation for whatever reason that was. And I was frightened. So after the operation, there was strange things started happening. And I was supposed to be 6 weeks that I didn't have to, that I needed to be off work. It ended up being 10 months before I could drive. It was quite a traumatic time. And there is the thought process that fibromyalgia can be kicked off from a trauma like that. But I do believe that the root causes were way, way further back. And so as I developed fibromyalgia, my empathic side then came out, the healing side came out. All these different things actually started happening to me that I honestly would have said a couple of years previously, like that, whatever, there's no way, all the woo type stuff then started happening to me, and that I would have just been laughing at myself, to be honest, but it did. And then it was quite a period of time. So I think we moved here 10, 11 years ago. So it was prior to that. And bit by bit, I was noticing, obviously, I could get up in the day, I could get on with things. I would just pop a couple of pills and get on with things. And I was doing an assessing job in the beauty world. And I just was that person. Like a lot of people are, I just get on with it. Let's ignore it all. Which was, as you can imagine, a struggle between one thing and the other going on. But that was the way I was brought up. And, so until the day that I literally just could not do it anymore. And I didn't know that I got the point. I didn't know the difference between what was the psoriatic arthritis, which was the fibromyalgia. And I gave up everything else that I was doing work-wise because I just couldn't do it. We've got a lot of dogs, and I love my animals, and I trained as an animal healer as well. I was trying to find something that I could do, but that obviously didn't help in the career aspect either. So I started dog boarding, but of course, which was brilliant business-wise. Home dog boarding was brilliant, but of course it's 24/7. So that didn't work either. But I did get the point that I literally could not do anything. I was unrecognizable. And I have some photographs of probably a good day when I had fibromyalgia, and I probably looked 20 years older than I do now. And so I started looking for answers. I was, which says in that my snippet in that book, I went to the doctors one day and said, look, I cannot do this any longer. I didn't even know how I drove there. I could hardly touch the steering wheel. I was in so much pain.
So just to clarify, for anybody that's not come across fibromyalgia before, if you just give us a rundown of the types of symptoms. So we're getting pain, we're getting exhaustion. What else was there for you?
The main things for me were brain fog, the fatigue. So your head's full of cotton wool, fatigue. So the slightest things were just exhausting. The pain is like being stabbed. It's being stabbed all over, and it does not give up. I had a lot of inflammation as well, particularly in my legs and my face. Jaw pain was horrendous, and I come back to it. If you've got anything going on with your head, it's just a whole other level, isn't it? So I had TMJ. I was grinding my teeth. And then there's other things that can contribute, like IBS, sight issues, so many things. But also my skin was going ballistic from the being sensitized. Always been a sort of delicate soul in that aspect anyway, but it was really off the cards. And I've always been such a thing with skincare as well. And I could not use even the mildest of products, I couldn't use on my skin. So, but like the psoriatic arthritis, obviously is slightly different, but similar symptoms. And I wasn't sure which was which. My knees were massive. So I just didn't know how to do anything anymore. And I went to the doctors this one day and said, I just don't know how. I need help. And she looked at me, and she does know me, and she looked at me and she said, Kris, you're very aware of your body, aren't you? And in that moment, for whatever reason, I didn't say anything, but I just went, I thought to myself, she thinks I'm a hypochondriac. Because unfortunately, fibromyalgia is one of those things, a bit like ME and chronic fatigue, that is not always thought of as a real.
Sure.
And this is a few years ago now. There is a completely different thing about it again now. But I wasn't sure quite what she meant about that. But I came home and I was devastated. And she knows this now, and she knows she's in my book. But it actually probably gave me the biggest kick up the arse that I needed. And as I say, I trained in so many different modalities, and it was a case of, right, let's start using them on myself. Practice what you preach. And I started looking at different things. And that is when I started meditating. And there's no way on earth I'd have thought I'd have done anything like that. I started meditating. I started learning to understand what my body wanted. And I got to this point, and I was very angry at the time. I was very angry with my situation. I was angry with my family and all these different things, as in my parents' side of it. And I was just anger. So I was very reactive. And I noticed one day I went out to the gate and I couldn't open it. For whatever reason, it was stuck, and I just lost my cool. And I sensed this in my body, this tension. And it was almost like a trigger for the fibro. So I started noticing these things and going to networking events. Because by now I started doing coaching, because I thought, right, I can do that online. I can do that around my symptoms. So I had to now start going to networking events, didn't I? I had to get my face out there. And that ball of angst and anxiety that I was in that room then, about to do my 20, 30 seconds saying who you are, what do you do, it was in my head was, who was I to say I could do these and help these people? And I noticed as well, the more I went, the fibro was getting worse as I was going there prior. So then I noticed I had to cancel because the fibro had kicked in. So it was all about being visible. So I realized fibromyalgia for me was about keeping me, it was self-serving, it was keeping me hidden.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And if I was to stand or sit or whatever you do in these things, in these networking events, and say who I was, my survival instincts were kicking in, and whatever was going on in my head, but my mind was going, but somebody's going to tear you down in shreds. Somebody is basically going to kill you, because that's the survival. I just wanted to run. So I started looking at all these different aspects, and I think one of the biggest learning curves for me that I could say to somebody who's got anything like that, one is to listen to what your body is trying to tell you. But also sit with it. I remember over a period of about 3 days, but I did nothing else. And I sat with it, and I allowed, rather than masking the pain with drugs and all that, which were further making me full of brain fog, because I tried the diets, I tried the yoga, I tried everything. Absolutely everything. It helped. But I wanted rid. And I sat with this and I let it consume me. I let the pain build up, and I literally went into a meditative state, and I just went through these different, it was extremely painful. But in those few days, I learned so much about myself, and also ancestral work. I did some ancestral work as well, and there was many elements to it. But I came out of that understanding so much about me. And then I actually was working with a coach there myself, who was in Boston, and we'd both trained in something called RTT.
Yep, I know RTT.
And so I'd learned it because I could see the impact it was having. So this coach, something one day just the pen just dropped, and about root causes and what have you. And she said, right, let's do a session. So she did a session with me all the way from Boston to me in Bridgend, and it doesn't sound quite as romantic as Boston. But we did a session, and I went back to root causes of my childhood. And I relived different things. And I had no word of a lie. The next day I woke up and I was pain-free. And yes, there were little reminders, because obviously that my default was for fibromyalgia to fulfill those needs. But I knew then what to do, in which basically tell it where to go. And even last year, with anxiety and survival instincts coming in again, I never saw a sign of it.
Brilliant. And isn't it so amazing as well that all of that kind of, and we just see this over and over and over again. It is the thing within clinical settings that these deep chronic conditions that appear, often it's unresolved trauma from childhood, even if it's not perceived as trauma from childhood, even if that just seems like that's normal and that's how life is. When we're able to look back at it with a different set of eyes, with a different set of tools, and we understand actually that had a really big impact on me as a child, and actually steered how I responded in so many other situations, and how that just builds up and up and up over time.
Oh, definitely. And what I learned during that time was, even though, people would say then, well, why didn't you have fibromyalgia as a kid then? Why isn't that, and that's because I was coping, whatever I was coping. And then all of a sudden, whether it was kicked off by that operation or whatever, I don't know. But all of a sudden it kicked off. And this is when and I think as you get older, there's more and more things are thrown at you, aren't there? And you think, I can't cope with this anymore. And that's when things start to pop up. And yes, I helped a lot of people back then. And one of my clients, who was a coach as well, like I say, she couldn't move forward in her business. And it was about when one of the sessions where we went back to what that was about, it was a simple thing as her being told off by a parent because a brother was pinching the dummy out the mouth. And so like you say, but as that trauma might seem mild, but for that child at that time was a massive thing because she wasn't being listened to, as opposed to something that could be what we would think as now as an adult as really, really bad. But for me, it was mainly, I think, my father he was a chronic asthmatic, and that sort of took over our family life. He was a very angry man, and usually my brother and I were always on the end of that, then, shall we say. And my little child mind thought, if I had something wrong with me, then like him, he might like me more. My mother may take more notice of me if I was like him. But there was one particular time where my father was shouting at me over something that I hadn't done. More often than not, it was me. But this particular time, I'm not going to say I was the easiest child. And I can sort of say these things because my father passed away a few years ago now, but my mother's still about. But he would literally scream at you for a couple of hours at a time. And anyway, he'd accused me of this thing. And I remember standing there knowing I could not speak up, knowing I must be about 10 or 11, and whatever I would say I would be grounded down again. And of course, my reaction within myself was anger. I would have tears rolling down my face and then being told, don't cry, that's just attention seeking. So all this anger, but my body at that time, when I went back to that moment, the feeling I had in my body was the same as fibromyalgia.
Yeah, brilliant.
And it was in that moment I thought, oh, yes, that was my thing to do, because I couldn't do anything else. Couldn't do anything else as that child. And that, but it worked, whatever, if that was the case. And I'm not blaming my father.
No, sure.
I've done a lot of work around that as well, because that's a whole other level again, isn't it? but it was for me then to try and work out, and because now I could do something about it. And that the mind is a powerful thing. It's absolutely powerful thing. But
I love that. I love the nuance. I love the subtlety, even though those are quite big kind of episodes really to have. In a sense, they're always things that are not now, because as soon as they're gone, they're gone. But the residue that they leave within the body, within that cellular memory, and how that then steers that physiology, that psychology that then instructs behavior over time is just always so fascinating. It's incredible.
So therefore, I suppose, being in that networking event, my fear was somebody was going to stand there and shout at me. So so I could not put myself through that.
Yeah.
So that inner child, all that inner child work. But it was a miraculous time. That's all I can say. And of course, after that, there were people that said, well, you obviously didn't have anything wrong in the first place.
Of course, because there's no way you could fix anything
Yes,
serious.
exactly. You know, and I did a lot of work with different people on that, on those lines and other things at the time. And I think one of the most mind-blowing one is somebody who had endometriosis, who was told she couldn't have a child. And we did one session, and this is 8 years later, she was told she couldn't have a child, and she was pregnant.
Yeah.
And I think that's just always going to stay with me. So she obviously, that baby's a few years old now, but I did get to the point that I just couldn't deal with other people's trauma anymore.
Yeah, sure. And
So
this is one of the difficulties, I think, within modern kind of thinking about health, is that especially a chronic condition is seen as something that, because the medics don't know what to do with it, there can't be anything that can be done with it. And this time kind of delving into it is not necessarily valuable, but time and time again, those results are coming forward. And you did describe yourself earlier on to me as a sensitized person. So do you think that that's what brought you to that point where you didn't want to work with trauma with other people anymore? It's just too much having to experience that process with people.
yeah, I'm very empathic, and I also realized that I think there are other ways you can do things without having to put people in that situation. Is there an actual need? I mean, it worked for me, obviously, but there are other ways that I have discovered since. I think it's the belief behind it.
Yeah.
A belief behind something and the intention of, if you've got to believe that it's going to help you in the first place.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, because you've got to have that mind shift.
Yeah.
So yeah, there were a few people that I helped, but some of the things that happened to them really, really stayed with me.
Yeah.
And I really struggled to compute that myself. So I thought, well, maybe I'm not the right person to be doing that, because I just take it all on board.
Yeah.
So hence then a change to, and I think as well, there was things I still needed to work on myself because of that, yeah.
Okay, so when you kind of got to that point of realizing you couldn't do this, is this also then when you started to gravitate towards the face yoga?
No, there's actually a bit of a gap between. I started getting more into spiritual work.
Okay.
Doing more of that, my crystal work. But what I noticed, I got to the point that I couldn't seem to then. So I was still coping with certain things. So I couldn't live without doing meditation. If I missed it for a day, I noticed I would panic. So I noticed I'd become again now this person that was holding on to these things. So funnily enough, beginning of last year, before we knew all about everything that happened, I decided I was drawing a line, a complete line. I was still doing some odd beauty clients and what have you. And because obviously a lot of that had disappeared with my condition, not being able to do people. And I thought, right, I've trained in so many things. I need to step back and see what I really want to do. And so I drew a line, and then we went into lockdown. So I thought, right, I'll look at different things I enjoy doing. And that is when I started playing around with my skin products.
Yeah.
And learned a few other modalities, as people did, trying to find something to keep you afloat and all of that. So I've always wanted to have my own skincare range. And like I say, I've always been very passionate about um, skin products, obviously with my job. And I also finding something that I could now use on myself. Um, so I started delving into that. What I didn't expect was to start making soap, because as a beauty therapist, that whole line, soap and beauty, just never ever was a sentence I'd ever thought I'd say, and always tutted if somebody said they were using soap. Um, but it's funny, isn't it, how you start looking into things. And anyway, I learned how to make traditional, proper soap, not the type that's mass produced and that leaves you raw. And I learned the whole process, which it's changed my skin incredibly, absolutely incredibly. So there are no chemicals in them. They are vegan. There's nothing added in them other than plant, which, you know, natural. And I always say arsenic is natural, so you've still got to look at that side of it. But
Absolutely.
you know, it's going into the whole, then the palm oil aspect and all these different things. But what I didn't know when I went down that angle was all the red tape that I was going to have to jump through to get my skin products on the market. Oh my God. So, you know, you're taking a step forward, two steps back, and it is like, oh, will somebody just let me know what the hell I want to, you know, I've got to do. It is mind blowing. So I did get my main soaps that I produced 6 soaps, um, and which are my chakra soaps, as I call them. So I did get those, and of course, then I started developing other bits and pieces, but it's just so expensive. And then you've got the, well, okay, somebody wants to buy your soap. What am I going to wrap them in? Um, I need to stick with the, you know, the vegan aspect. Oh, the recycling aspect. So many angles, but it is it has changed. It's changed my skin completely. So I'm looking at different ways then to expand on what I have done. But I also produced animal products, and I say animal, dog mainly, which horses, not cats, because that's a whole other thing again. But
cats don't like washing generally.
No, not at all. But again, I noticed on that journey how people were making animal products and throwing aromatherapy oils in there, or essential oils as people tend to call them these days, and not really, I don't know if that could be wrong, saying there's no thought process, but not understanding maybe of putting those in animal products.
Sure.
And so I wanted again to make something that was chemical free. You know, because people wash their dogs a lot these days. You know, it's become a thing. So why shouldn't they have chemical free as well?
Absolutely.
And of course, that's a whole other thing. Whereas we've got to have so much red tape to go through to get the product on the market for a human. A dog product doesn't need to have any.
Wow. Was that a surprise for you as well?
I completely, absolutely. And I just said, well, that doesn't make any sense to me at all. Because surely somebody should be watching what people are putting on innocent animals. You've got there are labeling rules you've got to follow, and then I thought, no wonder people are just putting these things out there then. So I made a paw wax, and that is going into a dog store shortly.
Brilliant.
And there's soaps and stuff like that. So that's good. But then also last year I learned face yoga, and I learned with one company, and it was okay. It was fine. I thought, yeah, maybe at some point, when I get back seeing people, I'll add that in bits and pieces. But then, and I was trying to sort of keep control, as the word came to mind, control of how I responded to the whole 2020.
Yeah.
And, like everybody was. And got to the beginning of this year and then realized I let everything that really, I suppose, the whole year sort of came to a head for me at Christmas time. And when I still couldn't see my kids and all of that. So I put on weight, and I looked in the mirror one day and I thought, I look bloody awful. I thought, this is not me. And I, once again, was sort of felt, well, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I need to do. Still can't see clients. Still can't. And I thought, what about face yoga? And funnily enough, out of the blue, I was scrolling through Instagram, as you do, and up popped Danielle Collins, who is a world-renowned face yoga and Pilates teacher. And I thought, what if I look at retraining with her? And that was the end of January, just before my 56th birthday. And I haven't looked back. I trained with her, and it is, compared to the first one that I did, it's a system, and it's just so much easier to learn. And I'm also now a trainer for her company as well.
So we've got to break it down a little bit there as well, because I mean, I've been, I teach qigong. I've done yoga since the late 90s, and so and in my mind, in face yoga, all I can imagine is kind of like asanas with my mouth, eyes, nose, and ears. So am I on the right track, or?
Yeah. So it's basically, face yoga is a mix of East meets West. It's made up of facial exercises, facial massage, acupressure, relaxation, and also then wellness comes into it. And obviously each of us that trains in it can add in their own different things they've learned along the way. So I do add some crystal work in mine. I do meditation with my clients, whatever, and skincare is a big thing, obviously. So it's a mix of those few things, mainly facial exercise. And you can, I suppose, the difference with traditional yoga is that you can literally do a few exercises. So for instance, say somebody wanted to work on the lines on the forehead, you could just give them those, and it is then about cosmetic, cosmetic angle. Somebody might say to me, look, I'm a real teeth grinder. I've got TMJ, and what can I do to help relax that area and correct all of that. So then you're looking at the relaxation, realigning with exercises and massage to a whole session. Then, say in a class, doing meditation, visualization, breathing comes into it. But when you're teaching someone how to do the exercises, you're trying to teach them how to do the exercises properly, because it's so important. Because the facial muscles are so small, you've got to do them right. And they equally as face yoga is really addictive. So because the results are so incredible, so people think, oh, I'll do them again today and I'll do them again later. You can overdo it.
Mm.
So I've had people come to me who have maybe watched exercises on YouTube, they're all over YouTube, and say, right, I'm not getting this right, I'm not getting that right. And then when we actually do a session, they realize they've been doing them wrong completely.
Yeah.
And for too long. It's just subtle movements. So we actually have a day of rest. So we do 6 days out of 7. So, and the idea with it is that you can do a whole session of the foundational exercises, which if you take your time doing them, it takes about 12 minutes a day.
Mm-hmm.
And we can add in other bits, as opposed to you can what I like to do with people is see how it can fit into the routine, so you can break it down, so you're not thinking I got to do something else, as well as my fitness, as well as finding time to do that and that and that and that. So it is a holistic therapy in my eyes. And when I started to do it, and I made that commitment just before my birthday that I am going to do this and commit to do this properly, I couldn't believe the difference very quickly in my face, but how I felt. And it was like somebody switched a light back on in my head.
Yeah. And it's more than that as well. On your website, there's the before and after photographs of 5 weeks of facial yoga, and it's incredible. I mean, and again, sat here looking at this lady who qualified in 1983 in Champneys and is now 56 and doing facial yoga. There's a part of my brain that just goes, really? Okay.
Honest. Yeah, I have got there's some photos on my Instagram actually, which shows a before and after I did with fibromyalgia.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've got one of before starting face yoga, and then a few weeks. I need to do some more up-to-date ones actually, because it's a continuous process. I'm hoping by the end of the year I look about 30. But I don't know if it quite works as well as that. But it is looking as well at what you're doing to your skin, the lifestyle. It's not just about the exercises,
of course,
but it's because you're working on acupressure points, you're working holistically as well. And as I say, I ran my actual first in-person group class last week.
Yay.
I know, which was a bit daunting before, in different ways, obviously, with everything going on, but it went really well. And one of the ladies couldn't get over how pressing an acupressure point was so painful. And I was, it's, to me, it tells me so much. And even just some of the simple exercises on her jaw were just really painful for her because she was so tense.
So how, as opposed to doing like an in-person class with you, what other ways can people access the face yoga with you?
So I offer one-to-one online, one-to-one classes online. So people can book a discovery call with me to find out if face yoga is for them and how it would work for them. So we do that, and then a full consultation, so I can find out what's going on behind the scenes, as it were. And then they can have a one-to-one. So the one-to-one, the initial one is an hour and a half. And I teach them the 18 foundational exercises. So they've got that to practice. They get a PDF with it as well. And something that they can learn to start building in to their routine. And also then add in a couple of other, depending on what they need, acupressure points, additional exercises, massage, and we talk about what well-being activity or whatever they need. And some people just have that. They just have that one-off, and they fly with it. You know, that they've got it into their routine. They're happy. Some people have a little half-hour session a few weeks later just to make sure they're doing things right. Or then I've got a 4-month program. So it starts off with that hour and a half the same. And then every month we do an hour. And so it's more than about accountability. So if someone thinks, I'm not going to keep up with this, or I need that kick butt type thing in between, or there's other things. So they might think, right, I want to work on this area more. I really could then have help with what skin products I need, or nutrition, or whatever. So it's an ongoing thing. I do plan to put a 6-week type program together. That's been in my head for a little while. So, but I also, I'm doing a collaboration very shortly with somebody. So I go into Facebook groups and do demos, that sort of thing. People want to see in their Facebook groups. But that's the main thing at the moment. There's different things in mind that hopefully is going to come through shortly in workshops and things like that. And also I teach it. So I became a super trainer, as they call it, for Danielle Collins. I was fortunate that she put my name forward to be a super trainer. I didn't realize at that time that there's only a few. So I was quite, I felt quite blessed to find that out. And so if somebody wants to learn how to teach it to other people, I can teach them as well with that. And there's various ways of doing that.
And how can people find you? What's the best way for people to get in contact with you if they want to check out your stuff?
So I've got a website, which is krisdavies.com, and that's KRIS, and that's Davis with an E, .com. I'm on Instagram, again, Kris with a K, L, as in Leanne, L Davis. I'm also on Facebook, and I cannot remember the tag for that.
Christine L. Davies.
Christine Leanne Health and Beauty. Yeah. That's my main. I'm on LinkedIn too. It's don't tend to go on there too often, but that's the main ways. And
I do really highly recommend people go and check out the website and go and just seeing some of the pictures on there and some of the information is, honestly, I've spent 18 years myself kind of working with people doing various things, and having that really holistic approach, looking at, I often use car analogies, and it's great to be able to polish your bodywork on your vehicle, which is how I see a lot of what I would consider traditional beauty therapy type work, but very few people are considering A, the type of fuel you're putting in, and B, how you're driving a vehicle. And you've got to look at it from that whole perspective if you really want to get a good result. And honestly, what you'll see on Kris's website is really exciting stuff. And we must mention as well, before we finish today, you also were one of the co-authors of the My 2020 book, weren't you, with Jessica Prime?
Yes. So having worked with Jess before, she asked, because she does do the Child Author Project, which is amazing. And she did a children's My 2020 and thought, right, let's do an adult version of My 2020. And of course I said, I'll put my penneth in. And I must admit, it was hard. I found it hard to start. I must, whereas telling the fibromyalgia story was, obviously, I had that planned out, but I must have rewritten the My 2020 thing so many times, because I kept thinking, so many people have had so many bad things happen to them. Why do people want to know what happened to me? Mm-hmm. And I started writing it from one of my dog's perspectives. And so, yeah, that was different. And then one day I just decided, you know what, I am going to write a poem. And it just literally downloaded. And there are some incredible stories in that My 2020. I've read most of them, and some things have happened with people. My children had flown the nest already, so I wasn't homeschooling, thank goodness. I had 6 children, so I can't imagine what that would have been like in my house. Obviously, we were hit financially and not seeing people and the fear and all that. So I decided to do it from the aspect which sort of relates with the mindset of my work, really, and about supporting people and, being accepting really of what's going on for so many people. And, because I found last year extremely lonely. We were out in the middle of nowhere, which was great to begin with, and fulfilled my still need that seems to be there of wanting to stay hidden. So, which highlighted stuff for me. But out came this poem, and I didn't go back and tweak it 100 million times like I normally would. And Jess said, "Oh, I didn't expect a poem." I said, "Neither did I." It just sort of came out, and I thought, no, I quite like that. So it is about the sort of philosophical side of things, really, and supporting people. And the fact is, you can only control one thing, and that is what goes on in your mind. At the end of the day. So yes, that's coming out. I think July. I think is the plan.
Yes, brilliant. So, and you'll be able to find the My 2020 book on all good online retailers, as you always can. Kris, thank you so much. I've really, really enjoyed spending the time with you today. It's been really interesting. I'm definitely far more intrigued by face yoga now than I have been before, partly because the results are awesome. And if I ever start to look at my face and think, man, that needs some work on it, then I know where I'm coming to, that's for sure. We'll put links to all of Kris's websites and social media and stuff in the description for today's podcast. But in the meantime, Kris, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a real pleasure. I've really enjoyed having you here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No problem. And everybody in podcast land, thank you for listening in. And we will be back in the not too distant future with another Integral Health podcast. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great week. Look after yourselves. Savvy skincare products, face yoga, being kind to yourself. It sounds like a good way to be. Take care, everybody, and we'll see you soon.